Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Set. I'm Abby Martin. 2012 presidential elections cost $6 billion, but the midterms are setting up to reach that same level of absurdity. See, according to Open Secrets, the upcoming midterm election will cost $4 billion, the most expensive to date. See, back in the day, candidates had to call constituents, knock on doors, and hold fundraisers. Of course, that's when the money they raised was tracked, subjected to limits, and the donors required to disclose who they were. So where did all this extra money come from this election? Well, it's called dark money. Simply put, it's campaign funds that aren't disclosed to voters. By using nonprofits as shell corporations, large donors who normally would be restricted on how much they can give are able to spend without a lick of oversight. Sounds pretty shady, but it's actually quite legal thanks to the 2010 Citizens United ruling, which defined campaign donations as free speech and that the First Amendment protects the speech of corporations. Dark money is funneled into political campaigns in order to swing votes that side that most benefits the people behind the cash, and it makes state and local elections a nice big target for corruption. In the case of Chevron alone, dark money from the corporation was funneled into local elections surrounding its plants in order to silence community opposition to environmental hazards and lack of safety. As Harvard law professor Lawrence Lessig puts it, today we can do legally everything Nixon had to do illegally. Democracy in 2014. Now let's break the set.
Speculation has been replacing hard fact.
Terrorists don't read Twitter.
Who's right and who's wrong?
It was a terrible thing to say, period.
The mistake entirely on me.
What we need is to question more and to keep it uncensored, real and raw. These words are hard hitting, you're watching your neck, but you need to tune in because we're breaking set.
It's Halloween, which means all across the U.S. the monsters, ghouls, and vampires are coming out to play. No, I'm not talking about kids in costumes. I'm referring to our elected representatives. See, this Halloween just happens to coincide with the run-up to the midterm elections on November 4th, which means politicians are furiously campaigning for the 36 Senate seats and 435 House seats that are up for grabs. Of course, with over 90% of incumbents holding on to their positions in both houses of Congress in recent elections, I'm using the term up for grabs pretty loosely here. But since Halloween is supposed to be a time to revel in the weird, creepy, and horrifying, let's take a look at the top 5 scariest candidates running for election or re-election. Starting with everyone's favorite Iowa pig farmer, Republican Senate nominee Joni Ernst. See, Ernst is in the middle of a heated battle to represent the Hawkeye state, and she wants to make sure you know about her down-home folksy roots.
I'm Joni Ernst. I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm.
But when she's not castrating hogs, Ernst is busy denying climate change, opposing a federal minimum wage, and holding on to the myth of WMDs in Iraq.
I do have reason to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Next up is Duncan Hunter, representative for California's 50th district. See, Hunter serves on the prestigious Armed Services Committee, which apparently gives him access to military information that no one else knows about, including domestic ISIS attack plots.
At least 10 ISIS fighters have been caught coming across the Mexican border in Texas. There's nobody talking about it. Because I've asked the Border Patrol, Greta.
Only one problem there, Duncan. Absolutely no one with any shred of credibility even hinted that ISIS is invading the U.S. from Mexico, leading PolitiFact to give the claim a rating of pants on fire. And don't think I'm leaving out the Democrats when it comes to terrifying politicians. New York Representative Charlie Rangel is the 3rd longest active member of Congress and the former chairman of the powerful Ways and Means Committee. And he's been continually running for Congress since 1971. This is a man who was censored by the House back in 2010 for a list of ethics violations that would make John Edwards cringe. Everything from illegally soliciting funds from corporations that had business interests with his committee to defending enormous tax shelters in Bermuda for oil companies. But apparently in New York, that just keeps getting you re-elected. Moving on to another Democrat out of the Empire State, Tim Bishop, representing the 1st District. Last year, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington named Bishop as one of the most corrupt members of Congress after he helped a wealthy Hamptons constituent obtain a fireworks permit in exchange for $10,000 in donations to his campaign. But all these candidates pale in comparison to Texas Republican Representative Louis Gohmert, a man who makes Sarah Palin look like an Oxford scholar. See, Gohmert thinks that terror babies must be stopped, that the White House has been compromised by the Muslim Brotherhood, and that teachers should have semi-automatic weapons in classrooms. But at least he's way ahead of the times when it comes to allowing gays in the military, saying this about the ancient Greeks.
They did have people come along who they loved. It was the same sex and would give them massages before they went into the battle. But you know what? It's a different kind of fighting. It's a different kind of war. And if you're sitting around getting massages all day, ready to go in the big planned battle, then you're not going to last very long.
Yep, these are just some of our incredible choices in the upcoming election. And the scariest part of all, they're all favored to win. Every time there's a major election in this country, we're reminded of just how dysfunctional our political system really is. Only 59% of registered voters bothered to show up to cast a ballot for the 2012 presidential elections, and the 2010 midterms garnered an even more pathetic turnout, with only 42%. Compare this with other countries' voter turnout. Uruguay sitting at 96% in 2009, Ecuador 91%, and even corrupt countries like Uzbekistan at 89.8% in 2007, although that might be for other reasons. But there's a good reason that millions of Americans, especially young Americans, are completely disenchanted with the so-called greatest democracy on earth. First of all, both political parties completely mirror each other when it comes to supporting bloody imperial conquest, the surveillance state, the police state, and the ongoing evisceration of civil liberties. Voters who identify outside the blue and red establishment are ostracized and are constantly told that supporting third-party candidates who they identify with is simply them throwing their vote away. Then there's the issue of gerrymandering, the absurd process of redistricting candidates to ensure victory for a certain party. This is actually what the Democrats did to their own longtime popular Ohio representative, Dennis Kucinich, in order to shut him out of the state. According to Truthout, although voters cast 1.7 million more votes for Democratic candidates than Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives races in 2012, according to the Federal Election Commission, Republicans gained a 234 to 201 majority in the House. And according to the Republican State Leadership Committee, the win was a deliberate aberration by way of redistricting. Gerrymandering is a political tool that's been employed for over a century and has been used by both parties over the last 4 decades to ensure majorities. But in recent years, the Republicans have perfected the practice. The fact that political parties can actually redraw borders and disenfranchise voters even more than they already are is insane and needs to end immediately. But gerrymandering isn't the only obviously corrupt process that undermines real democracy. The Electoral College is the most antiquated and nonsensical aspect of this country's political presidential election process. Who could forget this dark moment in recent history?
Big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column. This is a state both campaigns desperately wanted to win.
Stand by, stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes in the home state of the governor's brother, Jeb Bush, are hanging in the balance.
Yes, that shocking moment where Al Gore actually lost the presidential election despite having 540,000 more votes. Because of the Electoral College, Bush ended up winning Florida. Well, that and the diebold voting machines and the fact that his brother Jeb was governor. But I digress. So far, 4 presidential elections have been decided by the Electoral College, despite having won the popular vote. Amazingly, America is the only country in the world to have an Electoral College that allows for the indirect election of a president. This means that when people vote for president and vice president, they're really only voting for electors from the 50 states and D.C., who will then elect the chief executive. But the founding fathers originally envisioned the college without political parties, naively thinking that national politics could exist without them. And now the college electors are nominated by political parties, usually by committees or at state conventions. So already the process is completely restricted within the two-party dictatorship, squelching out the already marginalized voices in this country. The Electoral College also incentivizes candidates to only focus on swing states to campaign and make policy promises to, basically writing off more populated states like Texas and California. Thankfully, the Electoral College can be abolished if the will is there. And already, Rhode Island has committed to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, a law that will commit assigning their state's electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote, but will only go into effect when more states adopt similar laws. So while Citizens United is still the focus of election reform, until the outdated Electoral College and corrupt system of gerrymandering are abolished, we can never expect true representation. Being informed about your local candidates and voting is the least you can do this election cycle. So make sure you take the time to check out the candidates and ballot measures in your area. And for all our D.C. fans, breaking the set regular Eugene Perrier is running for D.C. City Council as a Green Party candidate that's running on D.C. statehood, a $15 an hour minimum wage, and the legalization of marijuana. During his last visit on the set, I've asked him why people should vote for him.
Well, I mean, I hope people would vote for me because they don't want the District of Columbia to maintain maintain itself as the third most unequal city in the United States of America, that we can have a place where people who go to work are lifted out of poverty, people can find a place to live, people can find a job, our energy rates stay low, and we're able to push towards a clean energy future. Essentially, a D.C. that recognizes the human rights of all its residents and makes that its central and primary focus. And that's what we're trying to do with our D.C. for the People campaign that people can check out at eugeneperrier.com.
Coming up, how the U.S. can transition to an entirely renewable energy-based economy. Stay tuned.
Here in the House, about 100 of the 435 seats are considered in play.
They needed 39 seats before the end of the night.
59 Democrats, 41 Republicans. You can do the math at home. 50 seats, 55 seats. Republicans need plus 10 to get a majority. That's what they need.
When it comes to combating climate change and weaning ourselves off fossil fuels, at this point, the only option is to implement a bold and aggressive plan that will force countries all over the world to embrace a renewable energy system, starting right here in the U.S. This notion spurred one Stanford University professor, Mark Jacobson, to put forward a 50-state plan to transition the U.S. to 100% renewable energy by the year 2050. Well, he joined me earlier, and I started by asking him about the feasibility of the goal.
We want to transform the energy infrastructure of the world and countries and states to completely wind, water, and solar. So instead of using fossil fuels and nuclear power, we'd use wind turbines and solar photovoltaics and concentrated solar power plants, some geothermal power and hydropower to power the world for all purposes. So all purposes is electricity, transportation, heating and cooling, and industry. So in 2009, we developed a world plan, and then we shrunk it down to a United States plan in 2011. But we really felt that that scale is too large to actually do anything. So we really needed to look at each state individually. So in starting around 2011, we started developing individual plans, first for New York State, and then for California, and then we decided, well, why not just do all 50 states? So we've developed 50 state plans for the United States, where we looked at, is it possible, is it technically and economically feasible to transform the energy infrastructure for all purposes to wind, water, and solar power? And the answer was yes, it is technically and economically feasible, but there are social and political barriers to overcome. And we think that this transition, though, despite these barriers, can be implemented by 2050 to get 100% conversion.
Thank you so much for taking this project on. It's one of the most important things that we need to do right now. And let's talk about some of those barriers that you just mentioned. States like West Virginia and Kentucky, where coal is king. How can these states transition to renewables in the coming decades without decimating their economy and causing mass job losses?
We found overall, if we converted all 50 states of the United States, we would create about 7.5 million 40-year jobs. About 5 million of these are construction jobs, 40-year construction jobs, and 2.5 million operation jobs. And we would lose at the same time about 4 million current jobs in the fossil fuel industries, including coal. So we'd have a net job gain of 2.5 million jobs across the U.S. Some states may lose a few jobs, but most states will gain a lot of jobs.
Mark, one of the things that's never discussed, almost never, when it comes to renewable energy is the scarcity of rare earth metals, which are key ingredients for things like wind turbines, solar panels. How can we make sure that we don't reach peak rare earth metals in the effort to build up these industries so quickly?
Well, we have looked at this issue. So, for example, for wind turbines, one rare earth element is neodymium, which you need for permanent magnets and turbine generators. And we found that if you want to power the entire world, let alone the U.S., the entire world with, let's say, half the world with wind, or half of all the world's power in 2030 with wind, we would need about 4 million large 5-megawatt wind turbines. And that would require about 1/7 of the neodymium of the known resources of neodymium on Earth. But that's just the known resources. People have not looked a lot further. There may be a lot more resources available, but you would not saturate that particular element by building the wind turbines to power half the world with wind. And same with other elements. I mean, lithium is another one. There are about 700 or 800 million vehicles on the Earth right now. And if we wanted to convert every one of them to battery electric vehicles, where we use lithium for batteries, we would have plenty of lithium, because there's enough lithium to produce at least 2.5 billion vehicles on the Earth right now, which is 5 times more than, or 4 to 5 times more than we need. And that's just based on known resources again. Mm-hmm. And with solar, there are other elements that are also rare, but there are so many options for solar that we don't, if one is short, then we'll do a different type of solar, and recycling may come into play in some cases.
Incredibly, Germany is perhaps the most successful developed country model when it comes to the use of renewables. How has that country been able to transition so quickly, and what lessons can we learn from the German model that we can apply here?
Well, in Germany, there was aggressive policies, a feed-in tariff specifically, where people who were incentivized to put solar on their roof, even though the solar resources in Germany are not great, but because the incentives were so large, many, many hundreds of thousands of people put solar on their roof, and that really grew the industry. It not only allowed people to buy these devices and use them and generate electricity and have lower rates themselves, but it created over 300,000 jobs in the industry and grew the industry beyond Germany, so that even though electricity prices in Germany went up on average, most people, anybody who put solar on their roof, their electricity price went down. So it was the people who did not put the solar on the roof, their electricity price went up. But revenues to the entire country increased due to the greater productivity, the more labor that was available, and the higher taxes that people were able to collect, the government was able to collect. And so there was a net benefit to the country, economic benefit to doing this, and to the world, because this actually spurred the solar industry around the world. And now, because of that, the price of solar has dropped so much worldwide that utility scale solar is on par with natural gas.
Mark, and of course, with the immense power of the oil, gas, coal industry here within the government, how can the green energy industry compete for influence?
Well, in the United States, there's two things going on. I mean, the prices of wind and solar have come down significantly, so they are becoming cost competitive on their own. However, they still, because our goal is to really transition the entire U.S. and world for all purposes to wind, water, and solar. And to do that, you really need all new energy to be clean. You can't have 50% clean energy and 50% dirty energy every year. You need 99 to 100% clean energy every year. And if the price of solar and natural gas, for example, are similar, then you're going to get half and half, and that's not good enough. So but right now the gas industry and the oil industry and coal industry, they all get subsidies in the form of not only direct subsidies through grants and through tax code benefits, but they also get the subsidy in that they don't have to pay for their air pollution or climate damage that they cause. So that's another type of subsidy. So it's really like they really kind of freeload off the people of this country and the world by increasing pollution and causing individuals' taxes to go up, their insurance rates to go up, their workmen's compensation rates to go up, and hospitalization rates to go up. So we need to get rid of those subsidies, and that requires aggressive policy measures. Now, wind and solar and other renewables, they do get subsidies as well, but in aggregate, it's much smaller than the fossil fuel industry. And so, but if we really want to transition for a short period, we need more subsidies for the wind, solar, and other clean energies, less subsidies for the fossil fuels, and that would allow a much faster transition. And then once we've transitioned, the cost of energy should be lower because you stabilize the price of energy by going to wind, water, solar because there's zero fuel cost. I mean, most of the rising prices of fuel is due to the fact that you have to mine and transport and refine fossil fuels, and so their costs go up over time, whereas wind, water, solar, once you put it up, you stabilize the price of energy.
What are the chances of getting a plan like this implemented? Have you proposed anything to Congress or the White House? And finally, what are the consequences of not embracing a bold energy plan like this?
Well, we think it's difficult at the federal level to actually implement a plan even such as this because it just requires so many people to agree on so many things. And it's just paralyzed at the federal level. But at the state level, there are some states that we think will be really ripe for trying to implement a plan like this fast, at least faster than other states. And so that's where our focus is right now. So we are focusing on, well, our goal, we have this group called the Solutions Project, which takes these science-based plans that we've been developing at a university and tries to educate the public about them, and also engages businesses and policymakers and try to inform them about the potential and what they can do to help. And we are optimistic that things can change once people are more aware of what is possible. But there are going to be certain states that are more likely to change than others. It's definitely an uphill battle, but it's something that I think can be done and has to be done, because if we do not do this, then, I mean, we look at it from a climate and air pollution point of view. 4 to 7 million people die prematurely each year from air pollution alone worldwide, including 63,000 in the United States. In the U.S., that costs over 3% of the GDP of the country each year. So there's a loss, a deadweight loss to our society due to the fossil fuel industries that everybody pays for. And this will continue. Climate change, global warming is getting worse and worse, and this will cost on the order of $700 billion per year just due to U.S. emissions alone in 2050. And worldwide, all emissions from global warming will be about $7 trillion per year cost. And so this needs to be addressed now. Otherwise, because if we don't stabilize energy prices, we also have the additional problem of energy price instability, which can lead to social, economic, and political chaos, and could lead ultimately to more war if prices of energy go up too high and people are starving around the world. So it's imperative that we address this right now.
It absolutely is. Thank you so much for all of your work. Mark Jacobson, Stanford University professor, really appreciate your insight.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
To close out the show, I want to feature a performance by a young hip-hop artist from here in D.C. Javier Starks is a prolific poet and songwriter who works with young people to teach them the importance of expression through art and how hip-hop music can be positive and empowering without using disrespectful or offensive language. He also has an active political voice and is involved in community organizing. Here's Javier performing his song Unchained, War Cry.
Breaking the set. Javier Starks. Abby Mark. Yo,
Calm down,
they put my ancestors on them slave ships. A new meaning for the words, moving weight, a heavy hustle for a racist. Now they got us working grave shifts. I make a name for myself, for all who remain nameless. They hoping we die before 25. They say we inferior, ain't it funny how we survive? We conquerors, they see the signs. Marley told us free our minds. They try to break us, so they proud we gotta keep alive. Pac was a panther, Marley was a lion, Bush was a cheetah, Obama's a never mind. We should focus on we busy shifting blame. We don't see the signs, we weak, it's a shame. It's the ballad of a live soldier. It's a jungle out there, from the Serengeti to the Noya. The world's getting colder. We march on, but the world's getting colder. Hey, I'm ready, this my war cry. Should've left me alone, but if they want a problem, then I got them, yeah, it's on, it's my war cry. Hey, I'm ready to explode. Shouldn't get me started, I promise I'm in the zone, feel my war cry. See, you do what you told, and I do what I want, I let them know that they should feel my war cry. Yeah, feel my war cry. Yeah. No, I'm not your norm, not your mainstream rapper. They say if I don't sell her, they don't pay to be a rapper. I'm about to Shango unchain these rappers. This brainwashed slave to the mainstream rappers. Do it for the little soldiers who hate slinging crack, so every night and day dream to be a rapper. Do it for the queens who hate feeling trapped, doing the math, thinking giving brains is the answer. I shed so many tears in the rain, the hurt and the pain, everything I can't explain. This the anthem. A path to green pastures. A mass grave for these rappers. Imagine it's the passion and the ballad of a live soldier. It's a jungle out there, from the Congo to California. The world's getting colder. We march on, but the world's getting colder. Hey, I'm ready. This my war cry. Should've left me alone, but if they want a problem, then I got them. Yeah, it's on. It's my war cry. Hey, I'm ready to explode. Shouldn't get me started. I promise I'm in the zone. Feel my war cry. Hey, you do what you told, and I do what I want. I let them know that they should feel my war cry. They should feel my war cry. Let me talk to them. Yo. 2013, they were scared because the Mayans. Meanwhile, I'm speaking my mind like Abby Martin. The government corrupt, but the people so quiet. The streets talk loud, but we sleep through the sirens. Zombies, a sign of the times. We need answers, just not the kind they provide. That's why there's no help with the AIDS virus. No cure. Tell me how you fight a war on violence. I'm positive they're lying, cause negativity is the only thing they steadily magnifying. They blow it out of proportion, exaggerated design, such an apparent paradox, the American paradigm. And everything you claim that you made off somebody else's labor, creators and slaves in the game. They betray us, then tame us, then train us to fight a war. And they name, boy, it's a shame, that's my war cry. Should've left me alone.
Restricted on how much they can give, are able to spend without a lick of oversight. Sounds pretty shady, but it's actually quite legal thanks to the 2010 Citizens United ruling, which defined campaign donations as free speech and that the First Amendment protects the speech of corporations. Dark money is funneled into political campaigns in order to swing votes that side the most that most benefits the people behind the cash, and it makes state and local elections a nice big target for corruption. In the case of Chevron alone, dark money from the corporation was funneled into local elections surrounding its plants in order to silence community opposition to environmental hazards and lack of safety. As Harvard law professor Lawrence Lessig puts it, today we can do legally everything Nixon had to do illegally. Democracy and politicians are furiously campaigning for the 36 Senate seats and 435 House seats that are up for grabs. Of course, with over 90% of incumbents holding on to their positions in both houses of Congress in recent elections, I'm using the term up for grabs pretty loosely here. But since Halloween is supposed to be a time to revel in the weird, creepy, and horrifying, let's take a look at the top 5 scariest candidates running for election or re-election. Starting with everyone's favorite Iowa pig farmer, Republican Senate nominee Joni Ernst. See, Ernst is in the middle of a heated battle to represent the Hawkeye state, and she wants to make sure you know about her down-home folksy roots.
I'm Joni Ernst. I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm.
But when she's not castrating hogs, Ernst is busy denying climate change, opposing a federal minimum wage, and holding on to the myth of WMDs in Iraq.
I do have reason to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Next up is Duncan Hunter, representative for California's 50th District. See, Hunter serves on the prestigious Armed Services Committee, which apparently gives him access to military information that no one else knows about, including domestic ISIS attack plots.
At least 10 ISIS fighters have been caught coming across the Mexican border in Texas. There's nobody talking about it. Because I've asked the Border Patrol, Greta.
Only one problem there, Duncan. Absolutely no one with any shred of credibility even hinted that ISIS is invading the U.S. from Mexico, leading PolitiFact to give the claim a rating of pants on fire. And don't think I'm leaving out the Democrats when it comes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Set. I'm Abby Martin. 2012 presidential elections cost $6 billion, but the midterms are setting up to reach that same level of absurdity. See, according to Open Secrets, the upcoming midterm election will cost $4 billion, the most expensive to date. See, back in the day, candidates had to call constituents, knock on doors, and hold fundraisers. Of course, that's when the money they raised was tracked, subjected to limits, and the donors required to disclose who they were. So where did all this extra money come from this election? Well, it's called dark money. Simply put, it's campaign funds that aren't disclosed to voters. By using nonprofits as shell corporations, large donors who normally would be 2014. Now let's break the set.
Speculation has been replacing hard fact.
Terrorists don't read Twitter.
Who's right and who's wrong?
It was a terrible thing to say, period.
The mistake entirely on me.
What we need is to question more and to keep it uncensored, real and raw. These words are hard hitting, you're watching your neck, but you need to tune in because we're breaking set.
It's Halloween, which means all across the U.S. the monsters, ghouls, and vampires are coming out to play. No, I'm not talking about kids in costumes. I'm referring to our elected representatives. See, this Halloween just happens to coincide with the run-up to the midterm elections on November 4th, which means politicians